Thank you very much. Now we'll move to Hollywood. And John, thank you for your comments.
Thanks, Congressman. I won't talk about our movie Extraordinary Measures. I'll let everybody see it. I don't want to give away the ending. But I hear Brendan Fraser lives in the movie, so that's it. Let me just close the panel and share with you some of my personal perspectives on the things that I've seen and the things I've learned and read about in the last decade in a very personal way, but also to learning of what happened before. So we talk about healthcare, and David just referenced the three major issues in healthcare today. That's how do we increase access to people of quality healthcare, and we absolutely need to do a better job at that. It's also about costs. I don't think necessarily how do you drive down costs. Good advanced medicine will always be expensive. It will not be cheap. What we need to do is better manage costs and have more transparent costs and more consumer-driven healthcare. But the third issue, and the one we're talking about here today, is innovation. We have today still the best healthcare system in the world. It is far from perfect. It's one we can and will make many improvements on. But as we make that, we need to continue to drive innovation. So let me share with you three vignettes and stories about people who have inspired me over our journey in the last decade. People who have three characteristics, I think, that will drive innovation that we need to re-energize in America. The first is risk-taking. The second is the second is determination. The third is vision. So if you go back to the 1940s and polio, and you look at Jonas Salk and what Jonas Salk was able to do, here was a guy who got a medical degree, an MD, but was unique at the time in that he wanted to go into medical research, and eventually ended up at the University of Pittsburgh at the end of the 1940s, received a grant from the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis. And that grant actually was an epidemiologic grant, and it was also a grant to study the number of different polio viruses out there. But Dr. Salk was an incredible risk-taker and innovator, and he saw an ability to take some of that grant money, some of those early learnings, and develop what was then the Holy Grail. It was a vaccine. He did that at a university with money in part from the government, with money in part from a private foundation, and start to finish within 7 years, developed a vaccine that essentially wiped polio off the face of the earth. The effort to do that, the fact that it was actually tested in 1.8 million children in its clinical development, that's the cutting edge of innovation. That's risk-taking, and that took a lot of people to take forward. And just as a footnote, I think many of you may know, at the end of that, he never patented the vaccine. He gave it to industry, and he never made a dime off of it. So that's risk-taking and innovation, and that's something we need to continue to drive in America. The second vignette I'll share with you touches in the rare disease field. Prior to 1983, there were only a dozen or so approved drugs or therapies for rare genetic diseases, and there are over 7,000 rare diseases identified in the world. Well, a woman had a son with Tourette syndrome, and she was trying to get a medicine imported into the United States that had never been studied or approved in the United States. And that woman, Abby Myers, fought very, very hard, an incredible amount of determination. Eventually enlisting the support of Henry Waxman, and Henry was a terrific champion for this bill, became known as the Orphan Drug Act. And it put in place a market-based system to promote drug development to, in part, fill in the gap between drug research and the larger, more prevalent disorders, and then leading back into the rare disease field. I know it's sometimes hard to envision today, but this was an incredible bipartisan effort. Republicans, Democrats, and Congressmen, you were in the House at the time, and remember, when it was signed in the White House by Ronald Reagan, he said, "I only wish with the stroke of this pen that I can also decree that the pain and suffering of people who live with these disorders would cease as well." It didn't stop with the stroke of that pen, but the Orphan Drug Act, fast-forwarded 27 years to today, has now led to the discovery and the approval of over 300 drugs to treat rare disorders, genetic disorders. We've got thousands and thousands of more diseases to go, but only because of the passion and determination of one woman and her ability to enlist the support of a lot of people in government, in academics, in industry, to come together to fix a problem. Did we have the ability to develop these medicines and bring us to where we are today? And my kids, Megan and Patrick, would have never received or had the ability to participate in a drug development program for their rare disease, Pompe, if it wasn't for the Orphan Drug Act. So I'll leave you with this last story, and that's about vision. So the first was about Jonas Salk, a physician researcher in innovation. The second was about a mom. This is actually about a patient, somebody who suffers with the disease, or suffered. My first day on the job after I left the pharmaceutical industry in biotech, I went up to Boston and I went to the bio show, the bioindustry show. And thousands of people there, and I just kind of wanted to be a fly on the wall and take everything in. And I went to the keynote address that night, and there were thousands of people in the audience. And the stage opened up, and a fellow came out. And he was in a wheelchair, and he rolled forward. And he talked about things that inspired everybody there that night, and it inspired me. He talked about the importance of innovation, about risk-taking, about drug discovery, and he looked at what was largely, almost exclusively, an industry audience in biotechnology, and he said, biotechnology is a great big word. And for people like me, it's a great big word that means hope. He said, and he suffered from paralysis, he said, I don't know that you will develop a treatment for my paralysis in my lifetime. He said, but what you give is the hope and the ability to develop these medicines so that the kid today who's in a car accident and becomes paralyzed, that he and his parents and his family have the hope, only because you people in this audience have the ability, the resources, the knowledge, the infrastructure, all of it to come together in a very uniquely American way, where government, industry, patient groups, philanthropy can put in place a system to drive the most incredible medical research in the world. And he actually likened it to the space program itself. And he was right. We didn't find a medicine in time to save him, and Christopher Reeve died a couple of years later. But that hope lives on.
Thank you very much. I'm going to see the movie, I can tell you that. I'll be the first one in the theater.